At the height of his power, Muhammad Ali had everything a man could dream of. He was young, he was rich, he was famous, he was the heavyweight champion of the world, millions admired him, stadiums filled just to watch him move. Cameras followed his every step. His name echoed across continents. For most people, this was the moment to protect success at all costs, to stay quiet, to stay comfortable, to play along. But Muhammad Ali chose a different path. When the most powerful government in the world demanded his obedience, he didn't negotiate. He didn't ask for special treatment. He didn't hide behind excuses. He simply said no. That single word cost him almost everything. His world title was taken away. His boxing license was revoked. He lost millions of dollars. And for years he was banned from doing what he loved most, fighting in the ring. The same crowds that once cheered his name now booed him. Politicians called him a traitor. Newspapers labeled him dangerous. Friends disappeared. Doors closed. And yet, Muhammad Ali never apologized. Why would a man at the peak of fame risk destroying his own life? Why would an athlete sacrifice fortune, career, and freedom voluntarily? Why would someone who had already won choose to lose everything? The answer wasn't pride, it wasn't rebellion, and it wasn't fear. It was belief. Ali believed that some things were more important than titles, more important than money, more important than public approval. He believed that a man must stand by his conscience, even if it means standing alone. At a time when silence was rewarded, Muhammad Ali chose to speak. At a time when obedience guaranteed safety, he chose principle. And at a time when the world demanded conformity, he chose faith. This is not just the story of a boxer who refused to fight. This is the story of a man who gave up everything so that he could live with himself. In this documentary, we will uncover the true reason Muhammad Ali sacrificed fame, fortune, and his career for his beliefs. We will explore the pressure he faced, the losses he endured, and the moral courage that transformed him from a champion in the ring into a champion of conscience. Because long after the titles fade and the cheers disappear, one question remains. What is a man willing to lose in order to stay true to who he is? By the mid-1960s, Muhammad Ali stood at the very top of the sporting world. He wasn't just a champion, he was a phenomenon. At an age when most athletes were still chasing recognition, Ali had already captured the heavyweight crown and the imagination of millions. He was charismatic, outspoken, and fearless. He predicted victories before fights, mocked his opponents with poetry, and delivered performances that backed up every word. The world had never seen a boxer like him. He wasn't only winning fights, he was redefining what it meant to be a champion. Money flowed freely. Endorsements, fight purses, and appearances brought him a fortune. He lived well, traveled constantly, and enjoyed the privileges that came with global fame. For many, Ali had reached the ultimate dream, success without limits. But beneath the spotlight, something deeper was happening. Ali was becoming increasingly aware of the responsibility that came with his fame. He knew that every word he spoke carried weight, and every decision he made would be watched, judged, and remembered. Unlike many athletes who stayed silent to protect their careers, Ali spoke openly about race, faith, and justice. He refused to separate his success from his beliefs. To him, being a champion meant more than collecting titles. It meant standing for something. At this stage in his life, Ali had every reason to protect what he had built. The system rewarded silence. It rewarded obedience. It rewarded those who stayed in line. And Ali knew that. Yet even as he enjoyed fame and fortune, he felt an internal tension growing. He understood that his life was about to reach a crossroads. One path promised comfort, wealth, and endless applause. The other demanded sacrifice, criticism, and uncertainty. Ali stood at the peak of his fame, but also at the edge of the most difficult decision of his life. Because soon the world would ask him to choose between his success and his beliefs. In the 1960s, America was a nation under tension. The country was deeply divided by race, by politics, and by war. The Vietnam War was escalating, and the government demanded unity, loyalty, and sacrifice. Young men across the nation were being drafted and sent to fight in a conflict many did not fully understand. To refuse was unthinkable. To question was dangerous. In this climate, Muhammad Ali was no longer just a sports figure. He was a national symbol, and symbols are expected to serve power, not challenge it. The government, the media, and the public all had expectations of him. As heavyweight champion, Ali was expected to represent American strength. He was supposed to stand proudly, follow orders, and inspire patriotism. Silence would have protected him. Compliance would have guaranteed safety. But pressure surrounded him from every direction. Government officials reminded him of his duty. Boxing authorities warned him about consequences. Sponsors quietly pulled away. Reporters asked questions designed to trap him into obedience. Ali understood what was at stake. He knew refusing the draft would mean punishment, possibly prison. He knew the system would not show mercy. And he knew that his race and religion made him an easy target. Yet the pressure did not break him. Instead, it forced him to confront a simple but terrifying truth. Obedience would preserve his career, but it would betray his conscience. At a time when America demanded unquestioning loyalty, Ali was asking moral questions. Why should he fight in a war against people who had never wronged him? Why should he kill strangers abroad while injustice at home remained unresolved? The power of the state stood against a single man, and the weight of expectation pressed heavily on his shoulders. But Muhammad Ali was not guided by fear. He was guided by belief. And soon he would make a decision that would place him directly in the path of that power, forever changing his life and his legacy. For Muhammad Ali, the decision he was about to make did not begin with politics. It began with faith. Long before the draft notice arrived, Ali had already committed himself to a moral framework that shaped how he saw the world. Islam was not just a label, it was a compass. His faith taught him that life was sacred, that every human being was accountable before God, and that conscience was not something to be ignored for convenience. Ali believed that obedience to God came before obedience to any government. This belief placed him in direct conflict with the expectations of American society. At a time when patriotism meant silence and compliance, Ali's faith demanded honesty and moral courage. He began asking questions that few dared to ask out loud. Why should I fight in a war I do not believe in? Why should I take a life when my religion teaches respect for human life? Why should I kill people abroad when injustice still exists at home? These questions were not popular, but they were sincere. Ali often said that Islam gave him clarity. It stripped away fear and replaced it with responsibility. He did not see himself as a victim of circumstance, but as a servant of God who would be judged not by public opinion, but by his conscience. Many critics claimed Ali was hiding behind religion, but those close to him knew the truth. His faith was deeply personal. He prayed, he studied, he reflected, and through that process he came to a conclusion he could not escape. To fight in Vietnam would violate everything he believed in. Ali understood that faith without sacrifice was meaningless. If his beliefs mattered only when they were convenient, then they were not beliefs at all. They were decoration. So when the time came to choose, Ali did not consult lawyers or publicists. He consulted his conscience, and his conscience was clear. Islam did not make the decision easy, but it made it necessary. And once Ali accepted that truth, there was no turning back, because the next step would take his private beliefs and turn them into a public stand, one that would shock the world and cost him almost everything. In 1967, Muhammad Ali stood before a decision that would define his life forever. The United States government had officially called his name for military service. For most men, there was no choice, only obedience. But for Ali, this was the moment when belief would confront power. When asked if he would step forward to be inducted into the army, Ali refused. He did not shout. He did not hesitate. He simply stood still. That moment lasted only seconds, but its impact would echo for generations. Ali explained his position with words that became legendary. "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong. It was a statement that shocked America. To some, it sounded unpatriotic. To others, it sounded honest. But to the government, it was defiance. Within hours, the consequences began. His boxing license was suspended. Athletic commissions moved quickly to strip him of his right to fight. Newspapers printed headlines calling him a coward and a traitor. Politicians demanded punishment. Ali was no longer treated as a champion. He was treated as a threat. What made the decision even more remarkable was how calmly he accepted the consequences. He did not beg. He did not retract his words. He did not ask for mercy. He stood by his position with quiet strength. Ali knew exactly what he was risking. He knew that his prime years as a boxer could be lost forever. He knew prison was a real possibility. But to him, compromise was not an option. He believed that a man who stands for nothing will fall for anything. In that moment, Muhammad Ali chose to lose his career rather than lose his soul. He chose to be judged by history rather than by headlines. The world saw a boxer refusing to fight. Ali saw a believer refusing to betray his conscience. And with that single act of defiance, everything he had built, fame, fortune, security, began to collapse. But what looked like the end of his life as a champion was actually the beginning of his legacy as a man of principle. The punishment came swiftly and without mercy. Within days of refusing induction into the military, Muhammad Ali's world began to collapse. Boxing authorities stripped him of the heavyweight championship. His license to fight was revoked across the United States. Overnight, the greatest boxer of his generation was banned from the sport he had mastered. Ali lost more than a title. He lost his livelihood. Fight contracts were canceled. Endorsement deals disappeared. Millions of dollars vanished. At the very moment when most champions earn the most money, Ali was cut off completely. His prime years, those irreplaceable seasons of youth, speed, and power, were slipping away. But the losses weren't only financial. Ali became a target. Newspapers portrayed him as un-American. Television commentators mocked him. Former supporters turned silent. Invitations stopped coming. Doors that once opened automatically were now slammed shut. He was convicted of draft evasion and sentenced to prison. Though he remained free while appealing the case, the threat of incarceration hung over him constantly. Every day carried uncertainty. Every knock on the door carried fear. Friends advised him to apologize. Promoters urged him to compromise. Even some members of the black community questioned his decision. The pressure to surrender was relentless, but Ali did not bend. He traveled across the country, speaking at colleges and community halls, explaining his position to anyone willing to listen. Without boxing income, these speaking engagements helped him survive. But more importantly, they became a platform for his beliefs. Ali paid a heavy price for standing by his conscience. He watched other fighters rise in his absence. He watched history move on without him in the ring. And yet, he never expressed regret. What he lost was visible to everyone: money, fame, championships. What he refused to lose was invisible, but far more valuable: his integrity. And as the years passed, the true cost of his decision became clearer, not just in what was taken from him, but in what it revealed about the kind of man he truly was. As the years without boxing dragged on, Muhammad Ali found himself increasingly isolated. The crowds were gone. The cameras turned away. The world that once celebrated him now treated him as a problem it hoped would disappear. Ali stood alone, not because he wanted to, but because standing by his beliefs left him no other choice. Many athletes of his era distanced themselves from him, afraid that supporting Ali might damage their own careers. Sponsors avoided him. Promoters refused to mention his name. Even some former friends became strangers. The loneliness was real, and it was painful. Ali was no longer traveling the world as a champion. He was traveling as a speaker, explaining himself again and again to audiences who were divided, some inspired, others hostile. He faced boos, hecklers, and threats. Yet he kept going. He could have ended it all with a single apology. He could have said the words they wanted to hear and returned to the ring. But that would have meant admitting that his beliefs were negotiable. and Ali refused to negotiate his conscience. At night, away from crowds and microphones, the weight of isolation pressed heavily on him. Doubt whispered. Fear crept in. He worried about his future, his finances, and his family. He was human, but even in his darkest moments, Ali remained steady. He reminded himself why he chose this path. He believed that standing alone for what is right is better than standing with the crowd for what is wrong. The silence surrounding him became a test of character. Without applause, without validation, Ali had to rely solely on his faith and inner strength. And in that silence, something remarkable happened. He grew stronger. The man who once thrived on attention learned humility. The fighter who once lived for victory learned patience. And the champion who once conquered opponents learned how to endure hardship without bitterness. Standing alone refined him. It stripped away ego and revealed conviction, and it prepared him for the moment when the world would finally be forced to listen again. As the years passed, the world around Muhammad Ali began to shift. The Vietnam War, once widely supported, grew increasingly unpopular. Images of destruction filled television screens. Protests spread across college campuses. Questions that Ali had asked years earlier were now being asked by millions. Public opinion was changing. Young Americans began to doubt the purpose of the war. Civil rights leaders spoke more openly against it. The moral certainty that once surrounded military service started to crack. And in that changing climate, Ali's stance no longer seemed radical. It seemed prophetic. People began to reconsider the price he had paid. They started to ask whether punishing him had been just. What once looked like defiance now looked like courage. Journalists revisited his words. Historians re-examined his case. Support grew quietly at first, then steadily. Ali's name, once spoken with disdain, was mentioned with respect. Meanwhile, Ali remained patient. He did not celebrate vindication. He did not demand apologies. He simply waited, trusting that time would reveal the truth. Behind the scenes, legal challenges continued. His appeal moved slowly through the courts. Each delay extended his exile from boxing, but it also brought him closer to justice. The nation itself was changing. America was wrestling with questions of race, power, and conscience. In that struggle, Ali's sacrifice took on new meaning. He was no longer just a boxer who refused to fight. He was a symbol of moral resistance. When support finally returned, it did not come in the form of cheers or titles. It came as understanding. And understanding for Ali was worth the wait. The world was beginning to catch up to the truth he had lived with all along. And with that shift came the possibility of redemption, not only for Muhammad Ali, but for a nation forced to confront its own conscience. In 1971, after years of uncertainty, the United States Supreme Court delivered its decision. Muhammad Ali's conviction for draft evasion was unanimously overturned. The ruling acknowledged what Ali had maintained all along, that his refusal was rooted in sincere religious belief. The victory was quiet, but its meaning was enormous. Ali had been right, not just legally, but morally. Though he was free to return to boxing, the years he lost could never be recovered. His body had aged. His reflexes had slowed. The damage of time was irreversible. And yet, Ali returned to the ring not as a broken man, but as a symbol of resilience. He fought again. He reclaimed the heavyweight title. He proved that exile had not destroyed him. But even more powerful than his victories in the ring was the legacy he had forged outside of it. Ali redefined what it meant to be a champion. He showed the world that greatness is not measured only by trophies, but by the courage to stand for one's beliefs, especially when the cost is high. History softened toward him. Former critics fell silent. Admirers grew louder. What once divided opinion now inspired admiration. Ali became a global icon, not just of boxing, but of principle. He had sacrificed everything he was told mattered: money, fame, safety. In return, he gained something far greater: respect that endured beyond his athletic prime. Ali proved that standing up for belief can change how the world sees you, but more importantly, It can change how the world remembers you. His story became a reminder that true courage is not loud. It does not seek approval. It stands firm, even when standing means standing alone. And that legacy would outlive any championship belt, echoing far beyond the ropes of the boxing ring. Muhammad Ali once said, "He who is not courageous enough to take risks will accomplish nothing in life." His life proved those words true. When Ali refused to fight in the Vietnam War, he was not chasing martyrdom. He was choosing integrity. He understood that belief is meaningless if it disappears when tested, and his belief was tested in the harshest way imaginable. Ali gave up everything the world told him to protect: wealth, fame, safety, even freedom. In exchange, he kept something far more rare: a clear conscience. Years later, history would honor him. Streets would cheer his name again. Presidents would praise him. But none of that mattered in the moment when he stood alone and said, "No." What mattered was that he remained faithful to himself and to God. Ali's story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. What do we truly believe in? What are we willing to sacrifice for it? And would we stand firm if standing meant losing everything? Muhammad Ali reminds us that true greatness is not built in moments of victory, but in moments of conviction. When the cost is highest, when the pressure is unbearable, when compromise is easy, but wrong, he showed the world that faith is not passive, conscience is not convenient, and courage is not the absence of fear. It is action in spite of it. In the end, Muhammad Ali didn't just win back his title. He won something far more lasting. He won his place in history, not just as the greatest in the ring, but as a man who proved that standing for your beliefs can change the world. Muhammad Ali's story does not end with a verdict, a championship, or applause. It ends with a question, one that still matters today. In a world that often rewards silence and punishes conviction, Ali chose the harder path. He reminds us that belief is not proven by words, but by what we are willing to lose for it. So as this story ends, the challenge remains. If your values were tested the way Ali's were, if your career, reputation, and comfort were on the line, would you stand firm, or would you step aside? History remembers Muhammad Ali not because he was perfect, but because he was brave enough to live by his conscience when it mattered most. And perhaps that is his greatest victory of all.